Buried treasure. Betrayal. A noose tightening at dawn. These aren't just the makings of a legend, they are the final, haunting notes in the life of a man who once sailed the seas not as a villain, but as a servant of the English crown. The year was 1701, and the shadow of the gallows stretched long across the cobblestone streets of London. Crowds had gathered, the air heavy with anticipation and whispers. The man at the center of it all stood tall, yet wearied by the weight of betrayal. Captain William Kidd, once celebrated as a brave and loyal privateer, now faced his end as a condemned pirate and a murderer. But Kidd's story is anything but straightforward. His name, still echoing through the corridors of maritime history, is wrapped in layers of contradiction and mystery. How does a man, entrusted with royal commissions and noble tasks, find himself branded an outlaw by the very hands that once applauded him? What chain of decisions, deceptions, and dangerous alliances turned Kidd from crown-appointed sea captain into one of history's most infamous alleged pirates? This wasn't just a trial, it was a performance, a spectacle, and perhaps even a political execution. Kidd's downfall came not solely at the hands of the law, but at the crossroads of empire, greed, and shifting allegiances. So, was Captain Kidd the bloodthirsty marauder the court portrayed him to be, plundering merchant ships and silencing dissent with violence? Or was he merely a pawn, caught in a storm far more powerful than any he'd faced at sea, a scapegoat sacrificed to protect the reputations of England's elite? This is no ordinary pirate tale. This is a story where the lines between hero and villain, truth and legend, justice and politics, blur beyond recognition. Stay with us, because what lies ahead is a journey deep into the murky waters of 17th century power, deception, and maritime myth. Where treasure maps may be drawn in ink, but destinies are sealed in blood. Welcome aboard the Crime Keeper, your trusted vessel through the stormy seas of true crime history, where every episode unearths the hidden, the haunting, and the historically profound. Here, we don't just recount crimes, we investigate legacies, challenge the official record, and dive deep into the murky depths where myth, motive, and misdeed intertwine. Today, we journey back to the 17th century, to a time when England's empire was expanding, its navy was feared, and the high seas were a dangerous game of survival, diplomacy, and double crosses. At the heart of this world stood Captain William Kidd, a man who began his voyage as a respected privateer, a government-licensed warrior of the waves, tasked with defending England's interests and hunting down pirates. But what happens when the hunter becomes the hunted? Once admired for his daring service and royal commissions, Kidd would later be condemned by the very nation he loyally served. He was arrested, shackled, and dragged from the decks of his ship to the floors of a courtroom, not as a hero, but as a criminal. Accused of piracy and murder, he faced a trial that was as politically charged as it was morally ambiguous. The verdict would cost him his life, but it left behind a legacy that history still argues about. Because Kidd's trial wasn't just a verdict on one man's life, it became a symbol of a much deeper rot. Was he guilty? Or was he a scapegoat, abandoned and betrayed by powerful figures who needed someone to take the fall for their own imperial misdeeds? And then there's the part of the story that still fuels treasure hunters and historians alike. The lost gold. The legendary stash Kidd is said to have buried before his capture, a treasure that may hold not only riches but answers. Was it real? Was it planted? Or was it just another piece of the elaborate narrative used to seal his fate? Stick around, because we're about to unpack a case that refuses to stay buried. Our story begins in the windswept port town of Dundee, Scotland, sometime around 1654, where a boy named William Kidd entered the world amid the salt air and clatter of dockside life. Like many of his generation, he was born into a time of uncertainty and opportunity, an age where the sea promised either glory or a watery grave. For young Kidd, the choice was clear: the ocean was calling, and he would answer. By the time the 1690s rolled around, Kidd had already carved out a name for himself, not just as a seaman, but as a man of ambition and adaptability. He wasn't just another pirate lurking off some tropical coast. No, Kidd was something far more complex, a privateer. In simpler terms, he was a pirate with a license, carrying documents signed by the English crown itself, giving him the legal right to capture ships belonging to England's enemies. At the time, piracy and patriotism were a matter of perspective, and Kidd walked that line with the confidence of a man who believed himself to be on the right side of history. He was smart, a shrewd navigator and a skilled leader, charismatic enough to command the loyalty of rough men who trusted no one. And when the situation demanded it, Kidd could be ruthless, meting out swift justice aboard his ship. But more than anything, he believed in following orders, in serving the crown, doing the job he was paid to do, and bringing glory to England. Or so he thought. Everything changed in 1696, when Kidd was entrusted with a new ship, the formidable Adventure Galley, a hybrid vessel equipped with both sails and oars, made for speed and combat. He was dispatched to the Indian Ocean, a lawless stretch of water teeming with pirates, rogue traders, and enemy vessels. His mission was clear and sanctioned: track down and capture French ships and known pirates. It was dangerous work, but Kidd had the crown's blessing, and what he believed was their protection. But once he set sail, the tide began to turn. The orders were clear. The reality, anything but. Kidd found himself far from home, in a region where alliances were murky, where ships flew false flags, and where every decision made in the chaos of battle could later be used as evidence of treason. Lines blurred, and soon, so did his fate. Because on those open seas, Kidd wasn't just hunting pirates. He was sailing straight into a trap, one that would slowly tighten around him, until the gallows awaited. Once at sea, the romance of Kidd's mission quickly unraveled into chaos. The Indian Ocean was not the arena of glory he had envisioned. It was a place of political ambiguity, harsh elements, and moral quicksand. His orders were to hunt pirates and seize enemy vessels, but with every decision he made, Kidd found himself drifting closer to the edge of what the crown might later deem criminal. Morale aboard the Adventure Galley plummeted. Kidd's crew, a volatile mix of seasoned sailors and cutthroat opportunists, began to desert. Disease, hunger, and long stretches without any successful captures wore them down. Without bounty or glory, loyalty eroded. Some men defected. Others died. Those who remained began to whisper, was Kidd a failed leader, or worse, a coward unwilling to take what could be taken? And then, in a moment that would define his legacy and seal his fate, Kidd encountered the Gardiners merchant. A wealthy Armenian ship, heavy with goods, sailing under the protection of a French pass. To Kidd, who had been commissioned specifically to target ships of the French crown, this was a legal and justified capture. The ship flew foreign colors. The paperwork confirmed it. The crew had affiliations with Kidd's declared enemies. By every definition in his commission, this was a prize he was entitled, no, obligated, to seize. But when word reached England, the reaction was chilling. The British government, now entrenched in a web of delicate foreign alliances and elite interests, branded the act as piracy. The Gardiners merchant wasn't just a ship, it was a diplomatic embarrassment, and Kidd's supposed act of loyalty became evidence of betrayal. His backers, some of the most powerful men in England, including noblemen, politicians, and investors, were suddenly exposed. Their names were connected to Kidd through the very privateering contract they had endorsed. And now, that connection threatened to tarnish their reputations and ignite political scandal. They acted quickly, distanced themselves faster than the ink could dry on the reports. To them, Kidd was no longer a valued instrument of imperial will, he was a danger. And when powerful men sense danger, they don't seek justice, they seek a scapegoat. Captain Kidd had gone from hero to hunted, and the same signatures, that had once legitimized his mission would now be used to justify his execution. After years at sea, with enemies multiplying and support vanishing, Captain William Kidd returned to the colonies, arriving in New York not with the swagger of a victorious privateer, but with the anxious heart of a man trying to outrun the tide. He believed that, if given the chance, he could clear his name. After all, he had acted under royal commission. He had captured what he believed were legitimate targets. Surely, his sponsors, some of whom sat in the halls of power in London, would defend him, right? But Kidd had miscalculated. Instead of vindication, he was betrayed once again. Arrested without ceremony, Kidd was torn from the land he had hoped would bring him salvation, and sent across the Atlantic in shackles. His journey ended not in a court of honor, but in London's infamous Old Bailey, where the stage was already set, and the outcome had already been decided. What followed was not a fair trial. It was a performance, designed to soothe political tensions and protect reputations. From the very beginning, the odds were stacked against him. Key documents mysteriously vanished, most notably the French passes, official papers that would have proven the Quidar merchant was legally a French ship, making Kidd's capture entirely justified under his commission. Without them, his case unraveled. To make matters worse, Kidd was denied legal counsel, a basic right even by the standards of the time. He stood in court alone, forced to argue his case against prosecutors who twisted his every word, while witnesses contradicted themselves, some likely pressured into testifying falsely. The court treated Kidd less like a defendant and more like a symbol, a sacrificial lamb offered to the public to prove that piracy would not be tolerated, even when it had once worn the disguise of patriotism. The charges were devastating. First, murder, for allegedly killing William Moore, a mutinous gunner, who had challenged Kidd's authority aboard the Adventure galley. Accounts of the incident varied, but the truth mattered little in a court bent on retribution. Then came 5 counts of piracy, each painted with the blackest of brushes. The verdict came swiftly, guilty. On all counts. And so, on May 23, 1701, Captain William Kidd was led to the gallows at Execution Dock, his final view the murky waters of the River Thames, where so many sailors had once dreamed of adventure. But there would be no romantic end for Kidd. As the noose tightened around his neck, he was no longer a man, but a message. His body was not buried. Instead, it was coated in tar, hung in an iron cage, and displayed for all to see along the riverbanks. There it remained, slowly decomposing in public view, a grisly warning to every sailor tempted by the lure of treasure and rebellion. This is what happens to pirates. But even in death, Kidd's story wasn't over. Because what if he wasn't a pirate at all? But just when the story of Captain Kidd seems to end with a drop and a noose, the line between fact and legend begins to blur. Because in the shadows of his execution, a whisper began to spread, a whisper of hidden gold. You see, before his arrest, during those final, desperate days of evasion and negotiation, Kidd is believed to have buried a fortune. The location? Gardiners Island, a quiet, unassuming stretch of land off the coast of Long Island, New York. There, it said, Kidd stashed chests of loot, gold, jewels, silks, and coin, either as a bargaining chip for his innocence, or perhaps in hopes of returning to reclaim it. And some of it. It was actually recovered. Officials reportedly found a small portion of treasure, catalogued and recorded by colonial authorities. But that recovery only fueled the fire. Because if part of it existed, what about the rest? Estimates suggest millions worth of treasure remains unaccounted for. And with that vacuum of truth came obsession. Across the centuries, treasure hunters, historians, and even conspiracy theorists have searched coastlines and seabeds, decoding legends, chasing half-maps and cryptic clues, hoping to uncover the rest of Kidd's hoard. Entire expeditions have been launched. Metal detectors swept across beaches, tunnels dug in secret. And every empty chest uncovered seemed to deepen the mystery rather than solve it. Even literary minds were ensnared. Edgar Allan Poe, with his love for the macabre and mysterious, is said to have drawn inspiration from Kidd's Tale in writing The Gold Bug, a short story centered on cryptic treasure maps and buried loot. But it didn't stop with fiction. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, during his youth, was so enchanted by the myth of Kidd's buried treasure that he personally joined expeditions to search for it. Yes, the leader of the free world, once a boy with a shovel, chasing the long-lost gold of a pirate who may never have been a pirate at all. And that's where history and mystery truly collide. Because the real question is this: did Captain Kidd really hide a vast fortune beneath the sand? Or was the legend itself planted, like a mythic seed, by those in power to paint him as a villain, a man driven by greed, rather than loyalty? Was the treasure a distraction, something to entertain the public while erasing the sins of the elite, who had used and discarded him? Maybe Kidd took that secret to the grave. Or maybe, just maybe, it's still out there, waiting. Now, this is where you come in. Because Captain Kidd's story doesn't just belong to the past. It belongs to all of us who still wonder what really happened out there on the high seas. Speech balloon, so let's hear it. Was Captain Kidd truly guilty? Was he a rogue pirate, drunk on power and gold? Or a tragic scapegoat, tossed to the gallows to protect the powerful men pulling strings behind closed doors? And while we're at it, imagine this. If you had the chance to follow a single map, to chase down one legendary pirate treasure, whether it's Kidd's, Blackbeard's, or something buried in the sands of time, which one would you choose? Would you dig into Caribbean coves, or comb the haunted shores of Madagascar? Drop your theories and your dream treasure hunts in the comments below. We dive deep into our community's ideas, and your take might just lead us to our next investigation. And hey, if you've enjoyed this ride through shadowy courtrooms, stormy seas, and forgotten legends, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It tells the algorithm we're onto something special here. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you don't miss our next journey into the darker corners of crime and history. We've got a treasure trove of stories, just like this, waiting to be uncovered. Captain Kidd's story isn't just a swashbuckling pirate yarn, it's a deeply human saga. A tale of loyalty turned lethal, of ambition devoured by betrayal, and of a justice system bent not toward truth, but convenience. It reminds us that history isn't always carved in stone, it's shaped by who holds the power, and what they're willing to sacrifice to keep it. Maybe Kidd was a criminal. Maybe he was a casualty of imperial politics. But either way, what he left behind is more than lost treasure. It's a legacy of unanswered questions and shadowy truths that still echo through courtroom transcripts, seafaring legends, and the quiet shores of Gardiners Island. So the next time you stumble across a tale of buried gold, or hear about pirates standing trial in the name of justice, take a moment to remember Captain William Kidd. A man who sailed for glory, served a crown, and was ultimately sunk, not by cannon fire, but by politics. Thanks for watching The Crime Keeper, where crime meets history, and every legend holds a deeper truth. If you enjoyed this dive into the darker depths of the past, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video with fellow fans of mystery, history, and true crime. Until next time, friends, keep questioning the past, and never stop digging for the truth.